Welcome to Tourism Talk. I'm Laura Oswald, Director of Marketing at the Paducah Visitors Bureau. Thanks for joining us today. We have a great show ahead with Joseph Robertia, author of Life with 40 Dogs. On our show, we love to celebrate Paducah's creative community and the local creatives that contribute to that creative culture. But it's also a joy of ours to share visiting writers, creatives who come through Paducah and contribute to our own artistic landscape. So today, it's a pleasure to welcome Joseph from Alaska to Paducah. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I guess just to begin, how did you end up here in Paducah from Alaska?
Oh, that's a story that starts a long time ago. And so before Alaska, we had been working in a lot of big cities, sort of doing the rat race like a lot of folks do. And we were just feeling, pretty burned out on it. And like maybe there was more to life than what we were doing. So we took some time, we saved up and hiked the Appalachian Trail all the way through. And it was great. We were able to clear our mind and kind of think about what we wanted to do and, what we wanted to be and where we wanted to be doing it. And so at the end of that, we had visited Alaska and we knew we wanted to move up to Alaska and kind of just live for a little bit up there and take a go at it. And initially we thought we were just going to go up for a year or two. And then, now it's 16 years later, the place really got a hold of us. But while we were out there, we met a lot of people doing the same sort of thing. I mean, we were, in our 20s then and meeting other people in their 20s trying to find themselves and what direction. And one of the people was a fellow named Ed Musselman who lives right here in Paducah and, was associated with several things, the Dry Ground Brewery and the Mellow Mushroom.
Know your name for our viewers.
Yeah, several things like that. And so we met him and we had moved on and off with him for a long time from Georgia on, but then as we got sort of close to the end, or relatively close to the end, I'd say around the Pennsylvania area, we just sort of started kind of moving at the same speed. And so we were spending 15 miles a day, which is, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, just hiking and talking, uninterrupted talk. And so you really get to know people, and you, over the course of hundreds of miles, you talk about, your background, your family, your interests, firsts, lasts, everything you've done. And so we just really hit it off with them. And we ended up finishing the trail with them. We summited Katahdin together. And that's a real, it's like a graduation ceremony. You remember the people that you finished that with. So we've stayed up with them, and at first it was a little difficult because we all ended up in different places doing different things, and then with the advent of social media, it's made it a little easier. And so we stayed up with what each other was doing in the families, and always trying to talk about getting together for another kind of hike or anything. So when we knew we wanted to come to the East Coast and tour the book, we said let's also see some friends and family because my wife and I both grew up on this coast and try to tie the two together. Contacted him and he goes, "You've got to come to Paducah. Like this community will love like this kind of thing. We're really into the arts, we're really into the creativity, everything you just described." And so far he's been 100% right. We're so thankful we came. It's been a great community.
Well, we are so glad you're here, and you've done a book reading at the library, which was very well attended. I think a lot of interested people in the work that you're doing, and we'll get into talking about that here in a moment.
Sure.
And then also having an event at Dry Ground.
Yes.
Ed's Brewery. So that's a great connection, and we're so glad that brought you here to Paducah on your book tour. So with that in mind, tell us a little bit about Life with 40 Dogs. I think that a great place to start might be to tell us about your team, your family, and then your dog team.
Sure, and the whole thing has always been from the very beginning. It's been a family affair, and my wife and I did it for years, and now recently in the last few years we've had a daughter who's 4, and that was all by design. We sort of brought her in as the dogs were starting to age out because our kennel has a lifelong home with us, and we've been doing this for like I said, almost as soon as we moved to Alaska. I would say within a couple of months we found ourselves getting into this. But those guys are getting older, so now we're starting to share it with our daughter so she can learn, the workload and that responsibility that comes with that, and the animal empathy that comes with caring for this many dogs, especially in their golden years when they start having health problems, and you have to make tough decisions and stuff about quality of life.
How did you initially get into it? You said you were just there in Alaska for just a little while before you did.
So we moved up, and like I said, we had saved up and had sort of a financial nest egg that we were trying to stretch as far as we could. So we went through the Appalachian Trail, and then drove across the country to Alaska with all of our stuff just in one, pickup truck, everything we owned. And we had no idea where we were going. We were just hoping to find some place and find some kind of work and settle into something. And so the most affordable place we could find was this little stamp-sized cabin, truly, 16 by 16 cabin with no running water, just in the middle of the woods. I mean, the town that we settled in's got about 700 people in it. And couldn't figure out why the rent was so affordable, even without the running water, but it turns out we're just surrounded by dog mushers. And, because nobody other than other dog mushers really want to live around, potentially 40 to some of these guys have 100 or 200 dogs, which it can get pretty loud when they're feeding or hooking up the dogs. They get really excited. So we just sort of ended up in this pocket of them. And we were coming off of, before we went on the Appalachian Trail, we were zookeepers and zoologists. So we'd spent all day around animals. We were really connected to animals. And we've always, had pets and worked night jobs or, other jobs in humane societies and animal shelters. So that was a big part. And so we were just taken away by the whole mystery of, what we perceived to be this amazing bond between, humans and canines. And so real quickly, we talked to a few folks because they would go right by our house. And so we stopped them and talked to them about where we could meet and learn a little more. And, up there, that's sort of one of those things, when you have that many dogs, you're always looking for help to either feed or scoop poop or help run a team. And so, my wife actually was the one who got a job pretty quick helping a fellow who had won the Iditarod. Wow. And so she was able to learn from truly a pro about, the ins and outs. And then after we had done that for a few years, we felt like maybe it was time to sort of branch out on our own. And we wanted to do something a little different than what had been done. So rather than, just buying a team off of a person who'd already had established team, we sort of kept that humane ethic. So we started trying to get dogs from the pound or dogs that needed rescuing from certain horrible situations, or dogs that we did get dogs from mushers that just didn't work out for one reason or another, maybe behaviorally or physically they just weren't fit enough to keep up with this person's team or whatever their desired goal was. So we built that team from there. And they were, just like the title implies, we got a lot of runts, we got a lot of rejects, rescues, all kinds of stuff. And we just sort of built the team to what we could with those guys, working from the weakest link up. And so that was sort of where the book came in. Is it was twofold. We spent our life with these guys, and they've done some truly amazing things. When you buy a champion, thoroughbred, and then it wins a race, it's an amazing accomplishment, but it's an expected accomplishment. When you take dogs that another person's given up on or given away, and then you train that dog to be a champion, and then you beat that person who gave up on that dog, I feel like that's a totally different achievement. And so we just felt like our dog's story was big enough that it was worth sharing with other people, because there are dogs all over the U.S. in pounds. And it's not just about athletic performance, too. Some of these dogs have saved our lives. Some of these dogs have been incredibly nurturing, great companions for my daughter. So there's a lot of different aspects that we've seen, and a lot of different sides that we've seen to this rescue dog thing. So we really wanted to share their stories so people would know. And then we wanted to share that message, too, of maybe giving dogs a chance that otherwise maybe you wouldn't consider or take a look at, to let people know that, hey, there's some real diamonds in the rough there if you take the time and give them a chance.
And I loved hearing the stories about those dogs last night and the challenges that they've overcome thanks to your nurturing. Tell us about some of your favorite dogs, or the best, maybe some success stories.
Well, you're not supposed to have favorites. That's what they always say. But we do. Yeah, I do. Anyway, I think my wife really doesn't. I actually ask her all the time, and she doesn't. But there's a couple of ones. I guess speaking for my wife, one of the big success stories for both of us, but certainly for her, is one of the dogs that we got was given to us totally for free. And it was a runt of the litter. It was a huge litter, and she was the tiniest little thing in it. And the musher just thought, there's no way this dog could ever amount to anything. And my wife took it in and put it in with just the other dogs. And it was so little that, the team, each dog in the team sort of does a different position. The front dogs sort of help steer and think, and the dogs right behind them assist them with steering. Then you have a lot of power, like a locomotive through the team. And then the dogs right in front of the sled are also a little bit more powerful, and they kind of help shift the weight of the sled around tight turns and obstacles. And those little dogs, they seem to be, if you can convert them to being leaders, tend to do the best up in the front, because they don't have that power of, say, a big 70-pound dog. So my wife just started working with this little dog in lead, and she immediately showed an aptitude for it. And the more she led, the better she did. And that dog ended up going on to be my wife's, I would say, main race leader. I mean, there's different dogs for different situations, depending on if it's hard, fast trail or deep powder or a big windstorm. And this dog is only about, when she was winning races with it, was about 28 pounds. So at the time she finished Iditarod with this dog, it was the smallest dog to ever finish Iditarod. At 28 pounds is a very little dog for Iditarod. And so that was the problem, is because the dog was all heart. Even when my wife would take it out of lead, it was still trying to lead. But the problem is I mean, we would get these 40-mile-an-hour winds, and when you're on a mountaintop, there's no trees, there's no buffer. So the dog would actually get picked up and like blown away in the wind. So she had to sort of put it back further in the team to stabilize it a little more. But the dog never quit on her, and like I said, it's finished every race she's ever started. My wife's done a lot of races, so I would definitely say that's one of her big success stories. And that dog's name's Penny, and she's just a little, looks like a little whippet or greyhound. You'd never think it was a sled dog at all. Probably my most sentimental attached dog would be one that I write about in the book in a chapter called Hammer to the Heart. It was a dog named Kalijah, after that old Hank Williams Sr. song. And he was just a beautiful sort of kind of red, crimson colored dog, kind of like red Kelpie looking dog. And he was just an all around amazing dog. He was beautiful. He was super sweet to the family. And he was just sort of an athletic overachiever real early on in our kennel, because when we were getting all these runts and rescues and rejects, we were doing the best we can, but they still were not quite competing at the same level yet as a lot of the, like I said, the true, thoroughbred, grade A dogs in some of the other kennels. But Kalijah was, and from an early age, he just put on a lot of muscle. He was incredibly powerful. He led. He was just an amazing dog, so amazing that my wife did take him as a 1 and 2 year old puppy. She started a few of the big races with him and let him go as far as he was comfortable with, and he was amazing. And I don't want to give away too much of the story, but he had an untimely death that was very painful for all of us. And so there's still just a lot of sentimental attachment to that dog. And it's definitely the hardest story to share in the book, but one I felt was also one of the most important, because I do feel like we were robbed of all the time that we had with him. A lot of these guys go to be 14, 15, 16 because of their athletic lifestyle and the diet that they eat. They're getting so much salmon and really healthy foods. So I just wonder about, because the dogs end up having more fans than we do, truly. And he had already been a real character at race. I mean, people, when we go places, like I said, people may not know us, but they'll know Penny. And they were starting to know Kalijah and ask about him and look for him. And like I said, part of that was his color and part of that was his charisma. So I felt like, in a way, the world was really robbed of his years of personality. So that was a hard one, I'd say. So that was probably mine.
And I think it's really special in the book. It's sort of a compilation of short stories that do focus on different dogs and kind of moments in this career that you all have had in this world. We're here in Kentucky, home of thoroughbred racing. So we're familiar with that sort of lifestyle and some of what happens with that. One thing that I think is so special is that you have committed to lifelong ownership of these animals. We know with some of the thoroughbred racing that those racehorses, once they retire, they end up at a retirement farm, hopefully. But you all have really committed to doing this in a very sustainable, caring for the dogs deeply sort of way. Tell us a little bit about that mindset and that outlook to have that approach rather than what may be a more traditional approach.
It's hard to describe, because to us it just seems so natural. I mean, it doesn't, in a weird way, it's just like, I think the bigger story is, why isn't everyone doing it? Because I don't know how you would spend that many years with a dog. Like, I guess for performance standards with sled dogs, I would say the peak of achievement is probably in the 2 to 7 year old class. And like I said, they live to be 14 or 15. But I would just have a really hard time with a dog that I'd raised from scratch and shared all those intimate moments with out on the I mean, you're alone with them for hours and hours, year after year in country with no one else. And, a lot of times, as I detail in the book, there's some really bad storm situations that we've gotten out of because of the dogs, not because of my winter survival skills or knowledge as a woodman or anything like that. I mean, those are in place, but what made the difference in me being here at times was some of those dogs and their ability. And so to just walk away from that as they just start slowing down and kind of need you more than ever, especially, like I said, as they get really old and do need your help. I mean, we carry them in and out of the house so they can use the bathroom. I mean, we'll hand feed them if we need to. To me, that just seems natural. I wouldn't I wouldn't do it any other way. I mean, I wouldn't do it with my family. I wouldn't walk away from
Right.
someone in need if my daughter or wife or someone became handicapped or anything like that. And I just feel like we owe it to them, and I want to do it. It's not even like a chore per se. It just feels natural and right and
Right.
part of the process, you know. So.
You mentioned your family again. One of the great stories that you shared last night was about Me Too.
Oh, yeah.
And his relationship with your daughter.
Yes.
Tell us about that. You know, you said that you came up against people that thought, how are you going to start a family with all of these dogs? How could you bring a child into that? But
Sure. And so that was sort of a double learning curve for us, because Me Too, her whole litter, we had tried to do something a little different, because people had told us, you know, when we were getting into this, that like these are sort of to be looked at as, you know, like the plow horse. These are beasts of burden. You know, this isn't your pet. It's not your family member. You don't want to be too sweet on them. You don't want to be too soft on them. You certainly don't want to treat them like a member of the family. And like I said, that just wasn't our background. It wasn't our ethos. Wasn't our way. And so with her litter, what we tried to do is we tried to raise the whole litter just in the house, never having them sort of live outdoors, and just be part of the family, and see if they would truly lose that zest for running, or if they would be able to do both. And what we saw is they're able to do both phenomenally well, because Me Too and all of her brothers have all been a core part of my wife's racing team. Me Too's one of the lead dogs. She's gone through some pretty big, long, hard races in deep minus temperatures and never had a problem. But she comes in and she sleeps on the bed with us at night. She watches movies. She curls up by us on the couch. And from the time my daughter was truly conceived, I think she's been a part of her life, because, you know, dogs have that extra sense of whatever it is, either smell or a sixth sense, whatever you call it. And she could tell when my wife started to carry our child and started sleeping on my wife's belly and sort of just moving around her a little more protectively, a little more cautiously. And then when we brought our daughter home from she was actually born at a midwife, not the hospital. When we brought her home from the midwifery, she just immediately treated her like a dog, and if that had been a member of the pack, and she just wouldn't let any of the other dogs near her. Was extremely vigilant and just staying right by her and protecting her and growling at any other dogs and actually strangers that came by. So it was a little hard to, you know, have the family and friends come by and see her. We had to sort of, you know, put her in another room because she was so protective. And I mean, she was almost doing it to a detriment to herself. She took the job so seriously. So we had to kind of pull her away from my daughter for, periods of time to let her use the bathroom and eat and drink, because she was just neglecting herself to ensure that the baby was completely safe. And because of that, they've grown up as buddies. I mean, like I said, we live in a very small, very rural place. There's not a ton of other kids in the area. And so my daughter's friends are all these dogs, and I would say Me Too's definitely probably one of her besties for sure. So, yeah.
Well, it's truly a beautiful story, and so many personalities and stories of the dogs. Now that you've given a little bit of an introduction to a few of them, they are race dogs. So tell us a little bit about that lifestyle. And you know, your wife is doing these races. We're not familiar with that here in Kentucky.
Sure, and I mean, honestly, that's been the best part of this leg of our book tour, is because this is the furthest south that we've gone so far. And so talking to the crowds here has been really fun, because it's just such a novel foreign concept for them, and so they're sort of learning about it as we go. Whereas, you know, in Alaska and places like this, I wouldn't say people take it for granted, but they're just sort of, it's the state sport, it's happening all around them, and so they sort of, it's just a different level. But down here, it's just so exotic that the crowds that we've met have been really great. They're asking some really incredibly cool and interesting questions. And it's been fun. You know, it's been fun sort of talking to them and showing them this side of life. And the presentations that, like we did at the library last night, or that, you know, we're doing while we're here, we try to include as many photos as we can to make it more of a presentation than an author talk, to show all these photos and images of Alaska for people that may never make it up there, so that they can kind of see these places and areas that we're talking about. And but yeah, the racing is certainly been more, I would say, my wife's thing. You know, when you have 40 dogs, you know, she needs as big a pool to pull from as she can. And so we're always running two teams together. And then also, running dogs was certainly my hobby. Racing dogs was not. I think that there's a lot of things that can be really fun. And then sort of as you put a competitive layer on it, then it sort of takes away all the fun. You know, I was a big part of this while we were doing it. I was a reporter. So most of my day was spent, like, you know, really tight deadlines, really high pressure, interviews and phone calls and just that whole model. And so for me, like, it was the escape of it. It was sort of like this cathartic thing that I would do where I got away from the phone and the computer and was just silent with my thoughts and just, the sound of their breaths and weaving through the trail and, seeing wildlife. And my wife enjoys that too, but my wife also grew up playing a lot of sports. She was a college athlete, and so I think she also sort of enjoyed the competitive nature of it too. So she's always done a little more of the racing, and then I've been sort of the assistant trainer and sort of a helper when she needs it on the trail and all of that.
So you mentioned the Iditarod, and
Yes.
I think, we've definitely heard of that here, but there are many other formats of racing that you all touched on in your talk. Tell us a little bit about what these races are like, and you mentioned some that have very defined checkpoints and other that are a little more free form. Share a little bit about that, what that looks like.
Sure. Well, there's all different types, and you condition the dogs to what kind of race it's going to be. And so, there's some short sprint races where people are going as fast as they can. The dogs may run 20 to 22 miles an hour, but it might only be for 5 miles. And then more of what my wife's tried to do is either mid-distance or long-distance racing. And mid-distance would be considered 200 to 300 mile races. And then like Iditarod, and another race that she's really enjoyed called the Yukon Quest, which runs from Canada through to Alaska, is another 1,000-mile race. Those would be more like ultra marathons, truly, like what we in human terms would consider a marathon or ultra marathon. And so they're moving at a lot slower speed. They might be moving at 7 to 9 miles an hour to cover that distance, running for 5 or 6 hours at a time, and then you rest for 5 or 6 hours at a time and then run again. And then depending on the format of the race, Iditarod, you can move checkpoint to checkpoint because there's checkpoints about every 5 to 6 hours. In the Yukon Quest, it's a little bit different race. It's a lot longer. It was sort of designed to be more of a quote-unquote woodsman's race, and so they relied a lot more on navigation and sort of independence, and sort of, you just have to be responsible and self-sufficient for yourself. So there's a lot more camping out there. So when she did that race, she would load up the sled with her supplies, her dog supplies, straw for the dogs, everything, and then she would take off on a 200-mile run, and I may not see her for 2 or 3 days, and she wouldn't see anyone else in that time, because even though she's on the race trail with maybe 30 other people, they're sort of all moving at the same speed, so she's never really seeing those people. So it was just her out in the wilderness for 2 or 3 days, completely self-reliant and completely caring for the dogs that they're relying on her. And then, other than maybe if a fox or a wolf or something comes out and runs along the team to check her out, she's pretty much on her own. So yeah, there's a lot of different formats, and that's good for people, because then they can kind of choose their level of comfort if they don't want to be outdoors more than whatever. And when you're standing on a sled for 5 or 6 hours in minus 40, some people long to get indoors and warm up. Other people, they get so used to it, if they come indoors, it's hot, they're sweaty, they don't really sleep well, so they just as soon put a sleeping bag in the sled and kind of, they're just acclimated to that cold, and they stay out in it.
Well, you certainly get a peek into that life
Yes.
in the book, so we hope that our viewers will pick up Life with 40 Dogs. Jumping kind of outside of the book a little bit, being a creative city, Paducah, as Ed kind of shared with you, Paducah is filled with creative people. And so having other creative people from other places with different perspectives to come in and share their work, like you are doing with us at this time, is really special for us. And we, like I said, love to share that on our show. What does it mean to you to get to travel to different places and share your own unique perspective?
Well, it's fantastic, mostly because, like I said, everything we've done, from the dogs to the book to even this book tour, has been a family affair. So I've got my wife and daughter with me. And so that's been really great to be able to share that, because, like I said, again, hate to keep harping on it, it's such a small place where we live, and it's not super diverse. It's just a lot of white folks and Alaskan natives where my daughter is, and that's not how the rest of the world is. And so it's really important for her to come around and be a part of this book tour and meet all of these different people of all these different races and ethnicities and truly cultures, and kind of have biscuits and gravy and see what all that's about, and so that's been a really neat thing for us, because that's something we can't give her where we are, and so that's been really great. And at the time, she's exchanging her side of things, because in her mind, everyone lives with 40 dogs. She doesn't get other kids don't, so she's able to sort of, in her own little way, share and talk to other people. And she helps at the book signing. She's even signed a few books for people, and so she's getting to share her little side of the story. And then it's great for us to meet other artists and stuff too. From we had dinner with some local folks and local artists here in town, some instructors here at the college, and kind of got to talk to them about their writing and their writing process. And they were parents too, so we got to hear how they balance creativity with child rearing, and see where our stories were similar and where they were different. And so that's been really fun. And hopefully, a big part of this, like the way we met Ed, is trying to make lifelong friends too. And so who knows, maybe some of these people that we met will come up and we can give them a sled dog ride, or they can get some couch space while they're on book tour in Alaska. Because Alaskans, when you have a 6-7 month winter, that's a lot of time to read and write. So we have a lot of readers and a lot of writers, and we're very thankful for both when they come and visit us. So.
And inspiring scenery. I mean, it really does seem like a great place for that.
It is. It's a great place for it. I mean, this people pay to go to writers' retreats to have that kind of thing, a cabin in the woods with no one around and no interruptions, no phone lines, no TV. So. Yeah, it's a great place for that.
Well, I've got the $1 million question, and Ed asked it at the book reading. What is your next adventure?
It's tough to say because, we still have, we're in the golden years with the dogs, and so they're really requiring a lot more care, because now they're in that stage where they're getting lumps and bumps, and we got to do trips to the vet, and a lot of them are on medicines and different things. And we're going to have another 5 or 6 years with them, so we're still going to have to be close to home. I think parenting is probably the next big adventure, because we're trying to really be the people we've always been with our daughter. Some people have a kid and then they sort of slow down or they change things, and instead we've incorporated into our life. She goes on the dog run, she's a part of all the kennel chores, so that's a big part of it. And then after the dogs, I'm not sure. We were zoologists before we got into working with the domestic animals, and we've done a long period here with the domestic animals. But in that time, the world's changed, and we're seeing a lot of deforestation and animals harboring on the brink of extinction. And I know when we were zoologists, there were animals that were very close to extinction that I remember thinking, like, someone will step up and save that animal, and they didn't, and it went extinct. Yeah. And so I feel like with what we saw with the dogs, it sounds like a cliche, but I think sometimes you have to be the change that you want to see in the world. And we certainly, it bothered us that so many dogs were being put down and euthanized annually, so we tried to do what we could. And I think we're probably ready to go back to that, maybe trying to grab onto another a little bit bigger, more global project and do some kind of a conservation project for the greater good of some animal species out there. But where we'll do it, what species, I'm not sure yet. Life's a path, windy road, so who knows where we'll go.
Well, this is certainly a great vehicle to share that message of conservation and protection of animals. And we hope that our viewers will pick up Life with 40 Dogs. Where can you find the book? Amazon?
You can, and hopefully at your local booksellers.
Yes.
We're big supporters of all the indie bookstores, so that's it. But if you can't, of course, all the big Amazon and Goodreads, it's always available on those. And one of my favorite parts of this too is if people read the book and enjoy it, please shoot me a review and tell me what it is you liked about it, because we did try to do something different and share a lot of different types of stories, from adventure to humor to some sad stories. And I like hearing how that resonated with people if they have a dog, what it was that they connected with. So if you like the book, give it a review and tell me what it was you liked. I love hearing back from people and having that dialogue with the people who are getting to know my dogs. So.
Definitely. Well, we will definitely stay in touch, and we thank you for joining us today, Joseph, and being in Paducah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. We've loved it.
Wonderful. Well, we will see you next time on Tourism Talk. Thank you for joining us.
1, 2, 1, 2, go. Hello.